Join Angie Taylor, a 30-year veteran educator and co-founder of Valor Global Online and Valor Global Foundation, if you long to leave a legacy for your family and leave your mark on the world. This show is for you. This is the Way of Valor.
Hey, welcome to the Way of Valor. I am your host, Angie Taylor, and it is good to be with you. You guys, today I am so excited about this podcast. It is not often that I get to do a podcast with somebody that I have more questions for him personally than I do even to benefit you, but you will all benefit from this podcast today. If you are a parent thinking about education, thinking about your kids' learning needs, this is the podcast for you today. Today I have with me Tyler Thigpen. He is you're so many things, Tyler. You're the founder of the Forest School. It's an Acton Academy in Georgia. You have an online school as well. You are a professor at Harvard and Penn in education spaces. You have a new book coming out that we're going to talk about in the podcast. So welcome to the Way of Valor.
Thank you, Angie. It's great to be here. Excited to riff with you.
Yeah. Tyler and I have already spent a lot of times. It's really rare. I think I run into a lot of people that are concerned about education, or they say, yes, it's broken, or they complain about it. I meet very, very, very few people that they don't just complain about it, they do something. And not only do they do something, they're quite successful at what they're doing, and they help other people do it. Tyler, you are a disruptor of education, and that makes my heart so happy, and I can't wait to learn from you today. I'm curious though, what was the pivotal moment in your life that made you say, listen, traditional education isn't working. We got to do something different here.
I think, Angie, you're a disruptor too, so it's an honor to be, chatting with you and learning from you. I think the place where I got the most vision for what could be possible in education at scale was when I started teaching at Georgia's largest public high school. It is called Mill Creek High School. It's in Northeast Atlanta. And I came into class, I was teaching Spanish, coaching girls volleyball, and I immediately saw that most of the kids in the environment were bored out of their minds. And I also discovered that a lot of the kids were what I would call alone. They suffered from what Sarah Heminger from Baltimore calls a poverty of isolation. And if I rewind a little bit, Angie, like I grew up in all over the Southeast. I moved a ton. And when I was 12, my parents told me if I wanted a car, when I was 16, I'd have to pay for it. And so in my entrepreneurial self, I started my own lawn care business. It was called Executive Lawncare. And I made some flyers and passed them out. And sure enough, by the time I was 16, I had $5,500 and I bought a 1989 black Chevrolet Blazer. It's the best car I've ever had to this day. And for a long time, I thought, look at me, I work so hard. I sacrificed a lot of weekends to be able to do that. But the older I got, the more I could see that not all kids had the same privileges that I did growing up. My parents really believed in me. They let me borrow their lawnmower. My grandfather taught me how to save money. My neighbors trusted a middle schooler instead of a professional lawn care. I even got the idea from, another kid in my class. And I realized I had social capital. I had the practical help that emerges from trusting, caring relationships. And when I got into public education in our nation, I saw that not everybody had that. They just weren't surrounded by a ton of caring adults. And they were bored. And I had been working at a youth group setting, and my youth group, when I was a youth minister, had grown from like 30, 40 kids to about 500 by the time I left. And they were really engaged. Wow. A lot of these kids were coming to church without their parents. They were driving, and it was because they were doing meaningful stuff. They were using what they were learning to help people. And so when I got into public school, I was like, and they don't see any purpose in what they're doing. And it doesn't
Yep.
have to be
Yep.
this way, and they don't have to be alone.
Yep.
And so that is really
Mm.
what really really spurred me on.
Yeah, gosh. I love that, because exactly, if I say this all the time, kids are not resistant against doing hard things if they understand why it matters. They resist hard things when it doesn't matter. And that's the piece that is so hard for education as a whole to get. So fast forward down the road, you decide you're starting the Forest School. Tell us kind of the main components of the school and how you came up with that.
Sure. Our mission is that each person who enters our doors will find a calling that will change the world. And my favorite verse in the scriptures is Revelation 7:9, which says, "After this I looked, and there before me stood a great multitude of people that no one could count, from every nation, every tribe, people, and language. And they were standing before the throne, and they had white robes on, and they were had palm branches in their hand, and they were singing, 'Salvation belongs to our God.'" And our school is diverse by design. So we're trying to maximize multiple dimensions of diversity. It feels the reason I bring up Revelation 7:9, it feels to me a little bit like that picture of heaven that's described in Revelation. It's like, so we're trying to maximize racial diversity. So we live in a racially diverse place in South Atlanta, and we don't want to have any one kid representing that one race in the studio, because we feel like that's too much for them to carry. To sort of be the token, white kid, or the token black kid, or the token Asian kid, or whatever. And we're trying to maximize economic diversity. So we have families that can more than afford to pay, some who can't at all afford to pay. We have age, gender, school background, religion, learning differences. Those are the dimensions of diversity. So it's diverse by design. And then the thing to me that's probably most deeply connected to my faith, when you think about how the fact that we're all made in God's image, which we've been thinking and wondering about what that means for centuries. And one of the things I've heard it described as well, if we're made in God's image, then we all have, thoughts, feelings, and plans, or volition or will, that come from a beautiful, ancient, sacred place. But when you think about the design of school,
so good.
The designs of school, the people working in them are amazing. They love kids, but the design of the environment shuts down, the feelings, thoughts, and plans of kids. So what would it be like to create a school that has, that does the opposite? It gives kids time and space and tools to explore their feelings and express them, to think through all the things and change their mind, and to make plans, and to try them out and see what happens and learn from that. And so we don't have teachers, we have guides, and they're Socratic, so they don't answer questions, they respond with questions. And we don't have grades, we have badges, kind of like in the Scouts. So it's mastery based. And we don't have homework. Apprenticeships start in middle school. Kids, if they're with us middle and high, typically do about 21 apprenticeships before they graduate. So they really get a sense of what they do and don't like. We do real world projects where kids are using their math, science, history, English skills to help people. Like tonight, actually, after this podcast, I'll be going to an exhibition, and our high schoolers have all written a new patent application for a new invention that's going to help somebody. Our middle schoolers have been working with some local business owners to tackle food deserts. And it's like real stuff that helps people, and kids are capable. Those are some of the features of our school.
That's awesome. What do you think some of the most misconceptions that parents have about a school like yours, or even ours, that is different from a traditional setting, a classical conversations setting? What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are about that?
The things that are coming up for me, this is a great question, Angie. The top things that are coming up for me are, one, that it's not going to help their kids get into college. I think a lot of parents are still who have college as a goal are, they're afraid about that. It's too different.
Yes. Yep.
I teach at two colleges, and I can tell you it's not bad. It's actually
Yeah.
really, really good.
I kind of like how humble you were about the colleges you teach at. When you say two colleges, they are substantial colleges.
There's
So,
something, and
yeah.
they're great. They're great social institutions. But that's a misconception. But colleges are being disrupted in many ways, and like, a lot of kids,
Hmm.
don't perceive the value as much anymore. And frankly, many employers are, not requiring college degrees and instead looking to skills. That's a trend, and that
Yeah.
trend is only going to keep getting bigger in the United
Yeah.
States. I think another perception is so. Are you familiar, Angie, with the populace study? Have you heard of this?
I am not. I
I
am not.
would this for you and the listeners here. I would commend it to you. Populace, I think .org or .com. Todd Rose, formerly at Harvard, did our nation's biggest ever recent poll on parent perceptions regarding education in schools, and
Mm.
discovered, among many other things, that for the first time in our nation's history, most parents want most things about schools to change, and
Mm.
and in fact, they actually want transformation, not just like improvement, and
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
yet they feel that they're alone in that. They
Yes.
think that other people still like the traditional system and that they're kind of crazy for thinking they want something new. That's actually not. And so Todd Rose wrote a book. It's called The Collective Illusion, you know,
Oh, that's good.
and because that's what it is. So I think that's a misconception. When parents want something different that engages their kids, they're thinking they're alone. They're not. They're not at all. And I think,
Yeah.
but it still takes work on our part as school leaders, you and I and others to provide comfort and confidence, to parents in that.
And I think you're right. I think that's the level that you provide in your school. I know this is what I provide in my school. The idea that I've been in the education setting for 30 years, the public, the private, have the gamut of it. And so we're not simply throwing the baby out with the bathwater for a newfangled
Right.
idea, which is, I think, often the concept that comes when we're disrupting education. I'm curious, though, in yours, because you're more of a
Yep.
self-directed approach, how do you balance the freedom or that tension that lies between truly self-directed environment, while still ensuring that kids are disciplined, learning rigor, grit, moving forward, doing the hard things?
Yeah. Well, it's a real it's great work. It's hard. It's fun and worth it. I think there's a couple ways we think about it, Angie. One is we try and really get clear about what's everybody's role. What's
Mm-hmm.
the adult's role? At our school, like I said, we don't have teachers, we have guides. So like, what are the guides doing? What are they not doing? And how's that different than being a teacher? What are the parents doing? What are the caregivers doing? And how's that different than in a traditional setting? What's the role of the learner? And then even increasingly, what's the role of AI? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
way it starts for us is at the beginning of every year, we guide our families and learners to create what's called a badge plan, which basically represents like what they want to study that year, and we help them think through the trade-offs, and then we codify it and formalize it and say, great, that's it. And everybody's got their own unique badge plan. We give them something to start with that they look at, and then they can
Mm-hmm.
add, subtract, or change to it based on their goals and passions and interests and all that. But then we run with it, and we run with that all year. And so when a learner succeeds, we celebrate that. When they go super fast and finish early, we give them an opportunity to go farther, or go deeper, or go broad,
Mm-hmm.
or go faster. And when they fall behind, it's a great moment to be like, well, what's happened? This is your goal for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and we really
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that, to go back to your previous question too, a lot of parents don't understand is our classrooms need productive struggle. Our kids
Yes. Yes.
they need to fail in a safe, secure environment.
Yes.
And and a lot of the classrooms in the United States do not have that right now,
It's
because
true.
kids are being explained to so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this. Like I used to teach. You probably did too. It sounds like, Angie. I mean, I used to really enjoy explaining things to kids. A couple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, it gave me comfort. Like when I was in a standards based environment, I felt a lot of anxiety and pressure to like make sure that my kids were crushing these tests. Um, and so I
Mm-hmm.
had to like make sure they knew it. But and then later, when I was in a standards based environment, when you still explain something to a kid and they respond positively, like that's a rush. It's a little bit of a dopamine hit, and it can
Mm-hmm.
become
Mm-hmm.
addicting. Um,
Yes.
but whether it's anxiety or addiction, like when you explain something to a kid, they don't have a chance to shoulder the responsibility of learning it for themselves.
Right.
And so they don't learn how to learn. And so I've
Right.
lived long enough now to realize, wow, we're sort of graduating generations of dependent learners who are sitting around waiting on adults to tell them what to do. But what we
Mm-hmm.
really want
Yes.
are self-directed, interdependent learners, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that balance of giving them productive struggle, but within their challenge zone, not in a panic zone,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
in their
Mm-hmm.
comfort zone, in the challenge zone.
Yeah. What would I love this. What would your advice, I'm looking at your book, The Guide for Self-Directed Learners, and how do you help parents who have really, they grew up in the traditional education setting, the achievement setting, it's all about the grade setting. How do you help a parent transition in their home from my kid, is in this traditional
Yeah.
school? And yet I can see, like, I hear what you're saying and go, yes, that all makes
Yeah.
sense.
Well, I'd be curious your approach too, Angie. Y'all have been successful, in this arena. What we do is, we do have meetings. I'll meet once a month with parents for parent coffees and teach and guide conversations, and we sort of share ideas willingly and steal ideas shamelessly. Is what we call it.
Good.
SIWSIS. Um, and I've found, there's an educational theory. It's called Bronfenbrenner theory that suggests like around every kid there's an ecosystem of different social institutions. You've got the neighborhood, you've got the family, you've got the school, you've got maybe a church, mosque, or synagogue. And if the caring adults in all those different environments are aligned in their expectations for kids,
Yep.
then their growth
Yep.
is going to accelerate. But if they're misaligned, the kids are going to get
Mm-hmm.
confused, and they're going to pit
Yep.
one adult against the other, and their development
Yep.
is going to decelerate. So we try and facilitate that alignment a lot. So a lot of those meetings is like, hey, can we get on the same page and just tell the child,
Yep.
that these are the expectations. We believe they can do these things. But in terms of some of the things that I teach our parents, or at least I say, use the word teach. I mean that I share with them and kind of open it up, and we make sense of together. I talk about future trends and what we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing coming in the world, and what implications that has for our children's readiness for life's next steps, and as a result, what needs to be true about school. I also teach them about learning science, and developmental theory. Like what do we know about how children and adults learn, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then what do we know about adult development, how we grow as adults, um, and then
Mm-hmm.
what do we know about childhood development, and how to help kids, grow their self-efficacy, their ability to believe they can do things, their outcome expectations, their knowledge of like what will happen if they do or don't do certain things. Um, so we talk about all those things, and I really have found, honestly, and I'm curious your take. The more that I used to think leading by example was like so important, but now I think self leadership is probably infinitely more important. And so I try and help our parents and caregivers really become great leaders of themselves first and foremost, so that they can stay true to their
Yes.
identity, their God-given calling, their value,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and stay connected to
Yep.
others, even if they disagree, with them.
Yeah.
Because children, we're God's given us these kids to shepherd, for a season. But God's
Yep.
got a calling on their life, and our calling is not their calling, so how do we
Mm-hmm.
stay connected to them in a healthy way? And that's how I think about it.
Yeah, that's so good. I think you hit it on the nail on the head when you were talking about alignment. I think that's the first and foremost thing that a parent has to be absolutely integral about when it comes to their child. If you have your child and a kid that is not in alignment with your home, in a school that's not in alignment with your home, it is on you as the parent to make a really hard decision for your family, even if your kid is not in the place of wanting to make that decision with you. Um, because you're never going to be able to get on the same page. And I agree with you. Being on the same page with your child's education and being fully bought into it is key to the overall well-being and success of your child. And so I think, we're the same as you in that idea of partnership. I'm a firm believer that God gave kids to their parents first. Nowhere in the Bible does it talk about the Christian school or the private school or your kid's school. It's always speaking to the parents' responsibility. And so, our job is to come alongside and enhance what is already happening in the home. And so, um, a parent being aligned with the values and purpose of that school, I think, becomes key to them being successful. I am curious, you talked about trends that you see in future. I'd love to have you share with our families what trends are you seeing? How are you adjusting in education as a result of those trends?
Yep. I think the biggest one I could maybe talk about and go a little deeper on is AI. But I can also share a resource. I worked for a time at a national nonprofit in school redesign called Transcend, a really great organization, and we created it's called Future Trends activity for parents and school leaders and educators to look at trends across multiple different segments of society, whether it was demographics or technology or health or medicine and education. And they have a set of cards. We have a set of cards that we built, and you can kind of make sense of that and then think through all those things. But as it relates to AI, the potential right now for AI to, um, it is a technology, and not dissimilar from it. I think about the scriptures where, in Genesis, the brick, right? The early peoples, put mud and water and straw together and made the brick, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
You could do, it's technology at that time, and you can do great things with it, or you can use it for ill. And and
Yep.
and obviously it was used to build great shelters and places of
Mm-hmm.
worship and
Mm-hmm.
convening, but it was also used to like make a tower to the heavens to like replace God. I think AI is the same. So AI, it could
Mm-hmm.
be used for good or ill, and the good is tremendous. I mean, I think the good,
Yeah.
in terms of amplifying the learning of young people, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
having a tutor, a personalized tutor, at your fingertips. And so how do we teach our kids how to ask really great questions, be
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
wise, and to be
Yeah.
discerning, and to, again, be self-directed, like to know, to gauge the extent to which they learn. I mean, just with our high schoolers yesterday, I was talking with them about how do you know when you've learned something, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to explain it to others, being able to transfer your understanding to do other versions of a similar question or problem, um, but really using AI to help you on that journey. I just think people can go so much faster learning now. it really if we start to relate
Yeah.
well to AI, the speed with which we can learn, because it just, formerly it took a while to search for stuff and research stuff online,
Yeah.
whereas now the AI can do that, a lot of that for you. I mean, you still have to be discerning,
Yeah.
and discern
Hmm.
bias and extraneous information, and but uh, you can go so fast. It's really, it's
Hmm.
I think the question will become like, how long can I consume? Now it makes me think about that movie, The Matrix, where Keanu Reeves is like, he's in this chair and he's like, gets loaded up and he's like, he's like, I know Kung Fu, after like 5 minutes, because he was like so
Yeah.
focused. Like, I think that
Hmm.
we're very close to a lot of kids gaining the ability to very quickly learn whatever it is that they want to learn, uh, as long as they
Hmm.
learn how to learn well with it. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's a trend, and that's going to disrupt teachers' jobs. It's going to
Yeah.
disrupt curriculum. It's going to disrupt schools and what schools are for. Um,
Hmm.
and then, of course, I think it can definitely amplify the work of teachers and staff and educators. And then, of course, there's all the bad that comes along with it, well, too. I
Sure.
mean, cheating,
Sure.
uh, forming unhealthy attachments or bonds with a technology,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think that trend, but it is rare that I use the word game changer, but it's an absolute game changer. So that's the trend I would be most,
Yeah.
you know, um, and then the other one, I think, and it comes back to this Revelation 7:9. I think in the United States, a lot of your audience, I know a lot of your audience is international, but for those of you who are in
Hmm.
the United States, learning how to live together, and the importance of being self-differentiated, uh, as a young
Hmm.
person and as an adult, to stay true to your calling and identity and values, yet remain connected to
Yeah.
others who may disagree with
Yeah.
you. I think is just going to be that much more important in terms of future trends.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially as we talk about AI. I am such an agreement with you on that it is a game changer. It's been a game changer in my life personally for my productivity. I'm a avid user of AI technology in my personal world and work world. But I think as we look at it, making sure our students, the danger is students not learning their own voice, and I think that's one of the key elements that I see as, our identity, as you and I have both talked, is so divinely imparted into us. And so I think the key is not to stay away from AI, but that idea that helping students identify what is their voice, what is their identity, and that AI is actually
Mm.
amplifying their identity and voice and using it in a powerful way rather than diminishing and taking away. And I think that's the piece we see in education, is that is a big struggle for us. But I think you're right. It's the winners in the world in the next season, um, are people that have learned to leverage AI as a powerful tool. I also think, though, and you've spoken to it at the beginning of this podcast, that the critical nature of love and relationship is not going away.
Mm.
That need for caring adults in a kid's life is actually all the more true and needed, for a kid. And I don't think, while there can be some, I understand, mimics, we understand that's unhealthy and that would never be a reasonable
Mm.
substitute, as we look at the future. So those are kind of my 2 cents. Well, this has been powerful. What, your parting words to parents that are still in, not all listeners on this podcast go to Valor. They have lots of different options. In fact, I would encourage you to, we'll put in the show notes links to your school if you're in the Georgia area, or if you're looking for an online option. Actually, Tyler and I were talking about this. You know, our schools are both unique, they're both disruptive, but they have different lens by which we're approaching the world too. So I would encourage you to check out what he has going on too. Your parting words for our parents as they are navigating a really complicated world right now.
Angie, what's on my heart to respond is an invitation for me, for us all, to continue to shoulder the responsibility for the shepherding of our kids. You know, if you, with your partner, or if you're a single mom or dad, you know, by yourself, think through, you know, by the time your kid is 18, you know, what do you want to be true of them? What do you want them to know? What skills do you want them to have? What competencies do you want them to have? And then say, well, based on that list, you know, you might even call it a profile of a graduate, you know, based on that, what kind of practice do they need right now? Like, what do they need to be doing? How do they need to be enjoying their days? And then really interrogate the school and say, is the school providing my child the opportunity to practice the things that I care most about, and recognize that no school is doing it perfectly. You know, no school aligns with you. And so there's always going to be a gap. The question is, which gap do you want? You know, which gap do you want to manage? So, but I do think I have found in my own health and growth and journey and faith that assuming full responsibility, you know, for the things that God's called me to as a father, you know, brings a lot of peace and a lot of promise. And so I would just commend us to that.
That is excellent word. Excellent word. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to throw the resources that he spoke about into our show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, or you know somebody that needs to listen to it, share it out with your friends on social media. Jump on, give us a 5-star review, because you know that helps get the word out. Thanks for listening today.